Hi, this is Derek, and this is my digital story, and it's called Derek's Trip to Vermont, and it's subtitled Rime Ice Winds. And for those of you who don't know, rime ice is the frozen precipitate that hangs in the air when it's really cold, and it collects on things, sometimes spectacularly. So fog, rain, mist, and when it freezes onto surfaces, it creates a layer, which is known as rime ice. Well, when I went to Vermont at the last week of March, spring break for us here at SLIS, it turns out it was the week before was one of the warmest on record, and all of the snow and ice that we were hoping to help ease our way up to the top of the mountains in the Presidential Range in New Hampshire had melted and gone away. But lo and behold, on my arrival, it was snowing in Vermont, and it turns out that a snowstorm blew through just for me, it seemed. And just to prove it, here is a 2-second video of the snow falling in Walden Heights, Vermont, which is where my friend John's cabin is. The snow fell for most of the next day, and we had 6 or 8 inches on the ground. But this particular picture you can see is at the end of the day, and you can see at the lower elevations all the snow had melted off. And in fact, by the time we got down to the bottom, all the snow that was sitting on the ground first thing in the morning, 6 inches or more, had already melted off by the time we got back, so that it was like an entirely different climate. But you'll note on the right hand side there are all those little mini rocky peaks on the way up to the summit being Mount Jefferson. The Castle Ridge Trail runs along that ridge and hits each of those peaks, and the one tallest peak on the right hand side is where we got stopped. We ended up having to come straight down that particular slope all the way down into the ravine and then all the way up on the other side to a place known as Emerald Bluff. It was about 10 miles round trip without having to make it to the top. Here's one of our fellow climbers, John Trottier, town manager for the township of Londonderry, New Hampshire. In the back is Charlie Bedard, a integrated circuit engineer. Here's all four of us at that first castle peak, and you can see the lovely rime ice all over everything. It was startlingly beautiful, but it turns out that there's just enough of it to make every step treacherous, but not enough of it to use crampons or snowshoes or any of the gear that helps you normally go over the top of all this stuff. And usually in a deep winter, all of these trees would be buried and everything would be under several feet of snow and packed snow and ice, and we would just merrily work our way up to the top in the cold and have only to deal with the cold. But this was not the case this time, and we were thwarted. Here is a picture of our path going all the way up to that first little castle, coming back down, around, and then making a great big loop. Here we are at the Emerald Bluff overlooking the Castle Ravine after having made it down the one slope and then back up the other slope in the cold. Me slapping my forehead and hoping and wishing that we had made it to the top when in fact we didn't. I was bummed because I had gas in the tank and felt very confident we would make it, even though we were unable to because there was too little cold and too little ice and too little snow. And then here's all four of us after the trip is over. On the next day, John and I went alone to the top of Gore Mountain, a smaller peak in northern Vermont, which is actually about 6 miles from the Canadian border. There was still snow there, and it was a really good hike, and we ended up using creepers the whole way, not even needing our snowshoes. But there was several feet of packed snow, and it was a pleasant and enjoyable walk. Along the way, we saw beaver ponds, and here's some beaver handiwork. We both remarked to ourselves, like, the kind of busy as a beaverness it takes to do that kind of work. Then here's me and John at the top of Gore Mountain. And then lastly, on our way out of Vermont, we saw, of course, maple syrup.